Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters of India, voices rising from the heart of Bharat, let us talk today not about politeness, not about diplomacy dressed in velvet gloves, but about the raw, unapologetic truth of power, pride, and survival. The question on the table, the one that is shaking studios in Washington and boardrooms in Beijing, is this: why did India choose China? Why did India dare to step outside the shadow of America? And my answer is clear. My answer is fierce. My answer is rooted in the soil of this ancient civilization. Because India will not be dictated to, because India is not a pawn on the chessboard of superpowers. Because India remembers history, India reads its own wounds, India carries its own scars, and India refuses to be lectured on sovereignty by those who themselves have crushed others under the weight of their empire. Now let us pause and ask, when America preaches freedom, do we not recall Vietnam? Do we not recall Iraq? Do we not remember how Washington's hands are stained with the ashes of nations destroyed in the name of democracy? And when America warns India, do not get too close to China, should we not ask, who are you, America, to warn us? Who gave you the moral license to decide who India should trade with, who India should negotiate with, who India should shake hands with? Listen to me now. India is not a beggar at the gates of Washington. India is not a follower waiting for scraps from the banquet of American power. India is an ancient civilization that has survived the Mughals, survived the British, survived partition, survived terrorism, and it will survive the arrogance of America too. Let us not mistake America's fear for friendship. America's worry is not about India's democracy. America's worry is about India's rise. Because for decades the world was told there can be only two poles of power, the West led by the United States and the East guarded by China. But suddenly, rising, roaring, refusing to be silenced, comes India. And India says, I will not choose between the two. I will choose myself. I will choose my interest. I will choose my destiny. And that, my friends, shocks America. When India signs an oil deal with Russia, Washington frowns. When India buys technology from Europe, Washington sighs. When India holds military drills with nations outside NATO's grip, Washington warns. And when India dares to sit with China on a table of dialogue, oh, America trembles because the monopoly on moral authority is slipping. Do you know why this conversation is important? Because the future of India will not be written in the White House. The future of India will not be drafted in the Pentagon. The future of India will not be whispered in the corridors of Wall Street. The future of India will be written in Delhi, in Mumbai, in Bengaluru, in Kolkata, in the sweat and spirit of 1.4 billion people who refuse to bend. So when the headline reads, Why India Chose China, let us understand what it truly means. It does not mean surrender. It does not mean submission. It does not mean that India has forgotten the border clashes, the betrayal, the bitter taste of Galwan. No, it means India has the courage to speak with its enemies, the wisdom to balance its interests, and the pride to say, we decide when we talk, how we talk, and with whom we talk. Let me ask you this. When America can negotiate with the Taliban after 20 years of war, why can't India talk with China? When America can shake hands with dictators for the sake of oil, why can't India pursue trade with China for the sake of growth? When America can declare America first, why is it a crime when India says India first? I tell you this tonight, sovereignty is not up for negotiation. Independence is not up for sale. India will not be bullied by America's sanctions. India will not be seduced by America's promises. And India will not be reduced to a junior partner in a so-called rules-based order written by the very same West that broke every rule when it suited them. So why did India choose China? Because India chose India. Because India chose dignity. Because India chose the difficult path of balance in a world of extremes. And America, my friends, is not ready for that truth. This is only the beginning, because the U.S. response, oh yes, it will shock you, and it will tell you more about America than it will about India. Let us step into the heart of the storm. Let us talk about fear, not not the fear of the weak, but the fear of the mighty. The fear that grips Washington today is not born of missiles or markets, not born of armies or algorithms. It is the fear of losing control. For 75 years, America has lived in the comfort of dominance. It told the world who could rise and who must remain silent. It played God with currencies, with sanctions, with alliances. And in that game, smaller nations obeyed, larger nations adjusted. But India endured. India bent when it had to, but never broke. And now, as India steps forward to carve its own path, America cannot digest it. Why? Because America is not used to partners. It is used to followers. America does not know how to sit eye to eye with equals. It only knows how to look down from above. And when India says no more lectures, no more warnings, no more ultimatums, Washington panics. Let us remind ourselves of history. In 1971, when India prepared to liberate Bangladesh, who stood against us? America sent the 7th Fleet into the Bay of Bengal. They came not to protect democracy, not to save humanity, but to intimidate India. And yet, did India bow? No. India marched forward because our cause was just, because our spirit was stronger than their threats. And today, 50 years later, the script repeats. America once again points its finger, once again threatens sanctions, once again says choose us or else. But the India of today is not the India of 1971. The India of today has an economy worth trillions, nuclear strength, space missions, digital revolutions, and a global voice. The India of today does not flinch when Washington frowns. Now let me ask, why is it acceptable for America to trade billions with China every year, but it becomes unacceptable when India engages with Beijing? Why does Washington's morality switch on and off like a light bulb, illuminating only when its interests are threatened? The truth is clear. America does not fear China's trade with India. America fears India's independence from America. Washington knows that if India is not tethered to its agenda, the very architecture of global dominance begins to crack. Friends, let us not be naive. America speaks of democracy, but sells weapons to dictatorships. It speaks of human rights, but cages immigrants at its border. It speaks of free markets, but imposes sanctions the moment someone dares to challenge the dollar. And now it wants to lecture India about principles. Let me be blunt, India does not need lessons from a teacher who breaks his own rule. When India chooses dialogue with China, it is not betrayal, it is strategy. It is resilience. It is the art of survival practiced for thousands of years. From the time of Ashoka to the time of Gandhi, India has understood that diplomacy is not surrender, it is strength. Only the insecure mistake engagement for weakness. Let us look deeper. America wants India as a counterweight to China. Washington dreams of using New Delhi as a frontline soldier in its new Cold War. But India says, we are not your pawn, we are not your proxy, we are not your shield, we are India. We fight for ourselves, not for your ambitions. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what shocks America, because India refuses to play the role scripted for it. India refuses to be typecast in someone else's drama. India insists on writing its own story, on defining its own alliances, on shaping its own future. Consider this: when India imports oil from Russia despite US sanctions, what happens? American media screams, politicians threaten, analysts predict doom, yet India stands firm. And what do we see? India's economy thrives, inflation is kept under control. People benefit. Who lost? Not India, only America's ego. This is what sovereignty looks like. This is what dignity feels like. This is what independence demands. And India will never apologize for it. Now I ask you, my audience, When will America understand that India is not a project to be managed, but a power to be respected? When will Washington see that partnership means equality, not obedience? When will the West learn that India's choices are not betrayals, they are declarations of freedom? Because here's the ultimate truth. America fears not India's trade with China, not India's ties with Russia, not India's balancing act. America fears India's awakening, an India that says no when others expect yes, an India that refuses to be cornered, an India that places the tricolor at the center of its foreign policy. So why did India choose China? Because the world is not black and white. Because the 21st century is not a Western monopoly. Because India will not limit itself to the binaries of Washington's imagination. And America's response, my friends, it will shock you. Not because it is powerful, but because it is desperate. And desperation, when masked as diplomacy, is the most dangerous force of all. Brothers and sisters, let us step back. Because in every storm, in every battle, in every heated debate, the question of today is never separate from the shadows of yesterday. When America looks at India and demands loyalty, let us remind America of a truth it conveniently forgets. India has never bent its knee to empire without paying the price of blood. We know empires, we have lived under them, we have suffered under them, and every time we have risen against them, from the British crown to the Soviet shadow to today's American pressure, India has always fought to preserve one thing, the right to decide for ourselves. Do you remember 1947, the year of our independence, the year the Union Jack was lowered and the tricolor was raised? That was not charity. That was not Britain granting us freedom. That was us wrenching it from their hands after centuries of exploitation. And yet, less than a decade later, the same world that applauded our freedom began to pressure us to choose sides in the Cold War. Washington said, "Come, join us against Moscow." Moscow said, "Stand with us against Washington." And what did India say? India said, "We stand with ourselves." That was the birth of the non-aligned movement. That was Nehru's declaration to the world that India would not be dragged like a puppet into someone else's theater of war. And let me ask, was that weakness or was that vision? Was that cowardice or was that courage? Because let me remind you, it is easy to obey, it is comfortable to follow, it is tempting to accept aid in exchange for loyalty. But true independence is tested when you have the courage to say no. And once again, in 2025, India stands in that same crucible of history. America says, "Be with us against China." China whispers, "Distance yourself from America." But India says, "We will talk to both. We will fight with neither. We will align only with our own interests." Now some critics say, but what about Galwan? What about the border standoffs? How can India speak with China when soldiers have bled on the mountains of Ladakh? To that I say, did America stop talking to Vietnam after the war? Did America stop trading with China after Tiananmen? Did America cut ties with Pakistan despite its harboring of terrorists? No, engagement is not betrayal. Engagement is survival. And India, more than anyone, knows how to engage without surrendering an inch of sovereignty. Remember this, we spoke with the British even as we marched for freedom. We spoke with the Pakistanis even after wars. We spoke with China even after 1962 because India understands the art of dialogue. The West confuses it with weakness, but in reality it is wisdom. And America cannot digest that wisdom because for America the world has always been binary. You are either with us or against us. That was Bush's doctrine. That was Cold War logic. That was the arrogance of empire. But India, an ancient civilization, knows better. We know the world is not black and white. It is 1,000 shades of gray. It is not us versus them. It is what serves us best today and tomorrow. Now let us confront another uncomfortable truth. America fears not only India's independence, but India's example. Because if India can say no to Washington and still thrive, then what stops Brazil or South Africa or Indonesia from doing the same? If India can walk the tightrope between Washington and Beijing, then others too may realize they do not have to bow to America's dictates. And that, my friends, is America's nightmare, the end of unchallenged hegemony. Think of it, America trades more with China than India ever had. American corporations profit in Beijing's markets, even as their politicians shout about freedom and security. But when India does the same, suddenly it is scandalous. Why? Because America expects loyalty, not equality, and India refuses loyalty to anyone but itself. And so we ask, why did India choose China? Because India does not forget history. India remembers colonialism. India remembers coercion. India remembers betrayal. And India has sworn, never again, never again will we be told who to befriend. Never again will we be punished for pursuing our interests. Never again will we be lectured on democracy by those who toppled democracies worldwide. Never again will we stand silent while others try to script our destiny. This is the heart of sovereignty. This is the heartbeat of And when America responds with shock, with threats, with sanctions, it reveals more about America's insecurity than India's strength. So let us be clear tonight. India's choice is not China. India's choice is not America. India's choice is dignity, survival, prosperity, and vision. And that choice, our choice, echoes through history like a drumbeat of defiance. And yet I promise you this, the U.S. response to India's path will not be calm, it will not be rational, it will not be respectful, it will be desperate, fiery, and dangerous. And that, my friends, is where the real shock begins. So the question that rattles this studio, the question whispered in Washington, shouted in think tanks, and debated in the halls of power is this: how did America respond when India dared to make its independent choice? And I tell you, America was shocked, not surprised, not disappointed, shocked. Because Washington in its arrogance believed that every nation ultimately bends, that every capital eventually bows, that no one can withstand the weight of its pressure, but India did. When India signed trade deals with China, voices in America rose in outrage. Senators thundered, analysts predicted chaos. Editorials warned of betrayal. Sanctions were threatened. Aid was reconsidered. And yet India did not retreat. Why? Because India understands what America has forgotten, that respect cannot be demanded with threats, it must be earned with equality. And equality is the one thing Washington has never offered. Listen closely. The U.S. response has been a theater of contradictions. On one hand, Washington says India is its most trusted partner, its democratic ally, its strategic bulwark. But on the other hand, every time India acts in its own interest, America brandishes a stick. That is not partnership, that is paternalism, and India will not accept it. The shock is this: America expected India to choose Washington over Beijing automatically. But India chose dialogue with China, not out of love, not out of trust, but out of necessity, out of strategy, out of realism. And America, so used to loyalty bought with dollars or fear, could not comprehend it. Let us not mince words. America retaliated in ways subtle and overt. Trade barriers disguised as standards, visa restrictions framed as security checks, technology bans painted as protection. These are the tools of empire, the silent chains of modern geopolitics. And yet each time India responded with calm dignity. You want to block our tech, we will build our own. You want to sanction our imports, we will diversify our markets. You want to lecture us, we will ignore you. That, my friends, is the resilience of a civilization older than America's Constitution itself. Let me remind America of its own hypocrisy. When the United States trades $500 billion with China every year, does it call itself a trader? When Wall Street thrives on Chinese markets, does it sanction its own corporations? When Silicon Valley depends on Chinese supply chains, does it call itself compromised? The double standard is breathtaking. But when India dares to import machinery, technology, or goods from China, suddenly the cry rises. India is betraying democracy. India is empowering the enemy. And I ask tonight, who writes this script? Who decides these rules? Who gave America the moral monopoly on defining loyalty? Washington's shock, let me tell you, is not just about policy. It is about pride. For decades, America enjoyed a unipolar world where every nation danced to its tune, and now India has broken that rhythm. India has declared, "We do not dance to your music, we play our own," and the shock waves are global. In Europe, nations watch India carefully. In Africa, leaders take notes. In Latin America, governments whisper, "If India can say no, why not us?" This is bigger than India and America. This is about the unraveling of a world order built on coercion. But let me warn you, when empires are challenged, they do not go quietly. America's response will not just be shock, it will be strategy. Expect disinformation campaigns. Expect attempts to ignite dissent within India. Expect pressure on allies to isolate us. Because when a superpower loses grip, it claws at everything to hold on. And here is where India must be vigilant. We must not be seduced by flattery, nor frightened by sanctions. We must not be divided internally, nor distracted externally. Our strength lies not just in missiles or markets, but in unity. Unity of purpose, unity of identity, unity of resolve. So when America's response shocks the world, let it be known the shock is not India's burden. It is America's awakening. The awakening that India is no longer a junior partner, that India is no longer a silent listener, that India speaks with its own voice, and that voice will not be silenced. Let me say it again, India's choice of China is not a betrayal of America, it is a declaration of independence. It is a statement to the world that partnerships must be built on equality, not dominance. And if that truth shocks Washington, then perhaps Washington needs to be shocked. Because this century will not belong to one superpower. This century will not be written by one pen in one capital. This century will be multipolar, multicultural, multi-voiced, and India will be at the center of that stage. So yes, America's response will shock you, but it will also liberate us. Because every threat, every sanction, every lecture only proves the point that India must walk its own path, and we are walking it with courage, with pride, with unyielding resolve. Brothers and sisters, I have told you about America's shock. I have shown you their threats, their warnings, their hypocrisy. But now let us talk about the most extraordinary part of this story. How India, instead of crumbling under that pressure, is using it as fuel, as energy, as momentum, to rise higher than ever before. This is the lesson of history. Every time India has been pressured, it has grown stronger. Every time India has been underestimated, it has proved the world wrong. Every time India has been cornered, it has found a way to break free. Let us remember 1998. India conducted nuclear tests in Pokhran. What happened then? America imposed sanctions. The West predicted economic collapse. Commentators declared India finished. But what happened instead? India innovated. India became self-reliant. India turned adversity into strength. And within a decade, the same America that punished us came knocking, desperate for a nuclear deal. That is India's resilience. Now fast forward to today. Washington threatens again. Don't buy oil from Russia. Don't trade with China. Don't carve your own path. And once again, the world predicts chaos. But what happens? India buys Russian oil at discount prices, refines it, and sells it globally. Sometimes even back to the West. India talks to China when it must, balancing the hostility with diplomacy. And India diversifies its markets, building partnerships in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. Instead of breaking, India bends the rules to its advantage. This is not weakness. This is strategy. This is what a civilizational state does. It survives by adapting, by transforming pressure into progress. Let us be blunt. America's strategy has backfired. By trying to corner India,
Washington has forced India to accelerate its independence. By trying to dictate terms, Washington has pushed India to invent its own. By trying to punish, Washington has pushed us to prosper. Think about it. The U.S. blocks us from advanced technologies, so India launches its own semiconductor mission. The U.S. restricts visas for our students and professionals, so India builds digital universities and world-class institutions at home. The U.S. criticizes our defense purchases, so India expands Make in India, building aircraft, drones, missiles within our own borders. Every attempt to pressure us becomes the very reason we grow stronger. This is the heart of Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India. Not a slogan, but a survival strategy in a world where no ally is permanent and no friend is unconditional. And let me say this clearly. India is not anti-American. India is not pro-China. India is pro-India. And when India chooses China in certain deals, it is not a love affair. It is a calculation. A calculation that says we will take what benefits us and leave what does not. We will engage without surrender, trade without trust, negotiate without dependence. That is sovereignty. Do not mistake this for arrogance. It is dignity. For centuries, India was stripped of dignity by colonizers. Our resources stolen, our industries crushed, our voices silenced. And today, when India insists on making its own choices, that dignity is restored. But dignity comes with cost. America's response is not just sanctions or speeches. It is psychological warfare. Media narratives painting India as unstable, reports exaggerating our challenges, lobbyists pushing against our interests. This is not new, it is the oldest trick of empire. To make the colonized doubt themselves, to make the independent feel isolated. But India knows better, because India remembers. India remembers the famine engineered by British greed. India remembers the denial of technology during the Cold War. India remembers every humiliation and every betrayal. And India swears never again. So what happens when America pressures India? We innovate. We expand. We unite. We refuse to bow. And this refusal is not just defiance. It is creation. Creation of new industries, new alliances, new visions. Let me give you an image. Imagine a blacksmith hammering metal. Every blow of the hammer could break it. But instead the metal grows stronger, sharper, more resilient. That is India under pressure. America hammers, but India hardens. America strikes, but India sharpens. America threatens, but India transforms. And this transformation is not just economic or strategic. It is spiritual. It is the awakening of a national confidence that says we are not second to anyone. We are not a developing nation begging for aid. We are a civilization state, a power in our own right, a voice that will not be silenced. So when you ask why did India choose China, understand this. India did not choose China. India chose transformation. India chose to leverage every pressure, every conflict, every insult, and turn it into a stepping stone toward greatness. And when America responds with shock, let us say, let them be shocked. Because the more they push, the more we rise. The more they threaten, the more we innovate. The more they try to corner us, the more we break out. This is the rhythm of our history. From the fields of Champaran to the deserts of Pokhran, from the struggle against the crown to the resistance against global diktats. India has always turned oppression into opportunity, and this century will be no different. Mark my words, the day will come when Washington itself will admit what it cannot yet say aloud, that India is not just a partner of convenience, but a power of destiny. And until that day, every act of pressure will only be fuel for our fire.
Listen, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we arrive at the climax of this debate, the summit of this argument, the soul of this struggle. We have spoken of America's shock, of India's resilience, of history's lessons, of sovereignty's price. But now let us talk of tomorrow, because ultimately this is not just about why India chose China. This is about what kind of world India will help create. Let me say it clearly, the future will not be written by Washington alone. It will not be dictated from Beijing. It will not be choreographed by Brussels. The future will be multipolar. The future will be democratic in spirit, not just in slogans. And India, yes, India will be the heartbeat of that future. Why? Because India is not just a rising power. It is not just another country. It is a continent of voices, faiths, languages, ideas. It is not just a market. It is a movement of 1.4 billion people who refuse to be silenced, who refuse to be manipulated, who refuse to be reduced to pawns. India's vision is clear: partnerships without domination, growth without exploitation, dialogue without dependence. When India chooses China for trade, it does not mean subservience. When India engages America in defense, it does not mean surrender. When India speaks at the UN, it does not echo anyone else. It speaks as India, and this independence is not arrogance, it is responsibility. Because if India compromises, the world loses its hope for true multipolarity. If India bends, smaller nations will be forced to crawl. If India surrenders, the dream of a world beyond Western diktats dies. So what shocks America is not just our choices, it is our vision, a vision where the global South has a voice. A vision where Africa is not just a resource pit, but a partner. A vision where Asia is not divided into camps, but united by connectivity. A vision where Latin America is not manipulated, but empowered. A vision where no nation is forced to choose between two giants, but allowed to stand with dignity on its own feet. That vision, my friends, is India's gift to the world. Now let us be clear, America is not the enemy. China is not the savior. Both are powers pursuing their interests. But India is the balancer, the bridge, the force of equilibrium in a turbulent century. And equilibrium terrifies empires, because equilibrium means equality, and equality is the one thing the world's powers have never offered us. But now India demands it, and not just demands, creates through trade corridors, through digital revolutions, through cultural influence, through spiritual depth. For when Bollywood reaches Africa, when yoga heals the West, when Indian IT builds the future, when Indian space missions touch the moon, this is not soft power, this is civilizational power. This is the quiet revolution that no sanction can stop, no threat can silence. So yes, the US response to India's choices will shock you because it will be loud, it will be angry, it will be desperate. But in the long run, it will also be futile. For no nation, however mighty, can hold back the tide of history. And the tide is turning toward multipolarity. The tide is turning toward balance. The tide is turning toward India. Let me end with a question. For decades, the world has asked, whose side is India on? But I ask tonight, whose side is the world on? On the side of endless hegemony, endless coercion, endless hypocrisy? Or on the side of dignity, sovereignty, equality? India has made its choice. India has chosen itself. India has chosen dignity over dependence. India has chosen sovereignty over subservience. India has chosen vision over vassalage. And if that choice shocks America, then let it be shocked. For shock is the first step to awakening to the truth that this century will not be American, it will not be Chinese, it will not belong to any one flag, it will belong to all of humanity, and India will be its conscience. So my brothers and sisters, let us rise with pride, let us rise with dignity, let us rise with the unyielding fire of a people who have survived every empire, and are now ready to define the destiny of the world. Because the question is not, why did India choose China? The question is, why did India choose? And the answer, my friends, will echo across the centuries. Because India refuses to bow. Because India refuses to break. Because India refuses to be anything less than the architect of its own future. This is our time. This is our century. This is our destiny. Jai. To me, when I tell you this, your life is like a garden. You can't just throw seeds anywhere and expect beautiful flowers. You must intentionally plant, nurture, and tend to your dreams. That's how real growth happens. That's how you bloom.